Everyone.
Everyone, welcome. Happy Tuesday. If you're here to learn about policy around building decarbonization in Illinois, you're in the right place. Welcome, everyone. I'm Amy Ryder. I'm the Director of Policy Acceleration here at the Building Decarbonization Coalition, and really excited to be able to share some of the experts on Illinois policy and have them share with you what's going on there today. So welcome. Looks like we've got everybody here, so we're ready to get started. Just in case you aren't aware of who we are, we'll start with some just introductory remarks about the Building Decarbonization Coalition. So who is the BDC? If you're not familiar with us, we are a fairly young organization, about 4 years old now. We started with some very specific goals around how do we get fossil fuels out of the built environment, how to decarbonize buildings. And those goals really reflect here. We've got 5 primary goals. We want to build consumer awareness, both the consumers and, of course, we all live somewhere. So policymakers and contractors as well, starting with people at their homes, and hopefully inspire them to be excited about electrification solutions. And then ensure that there's good value in people making that switch, as well as value to those deploying it, the contractors and the builders who would be providing these new solutions, while also preparing the supply chains to deliver that increased demand that we're hoping to build and match the demand with supply readiness. While, and important to today, aligning the policy with those overarching goals. The way the Building Decarbonization Coalition goes about doing this is through 3 primary mechanisms, with the goal of stopping expansion of the gas network, working to phase out fossil fuel appliances, and building the decarbonization marketplace, again, that supply chain, all with equity centered in mind. And there's lots of different policy mechanisms that we utilize to do that. And so we'll be seeing a kind of a smattering of those today, but the way we define policy, just so you're aware, really runs the gamut of any lever that can be set in place to move the market, the consumers, et cetera. So we are a membership-based organization, so it'd be remiss if I didn't mention it. While this call is free, as are most of our resources, all of our resources, you can reach them on our website at buildingdecarb.org. But we also have a membership structure as well for those of you that want to donate further to the cause in whichever way that you are comfortable and able. We welcome one and all. So feel free to join us. And then just some logistics before I get started and turn you over to our illustrious panel today. Everyone, you'll note, is muted already. We'll be asking you to record your questions in the chat. We have some fabulous team members who will be keeping an eye on that for me. Thank you guys very much. We will be recording this and it will be available online as well in that resource library after the fact. So great resources for you there. We are hoping to leave some time at the end for you to ask questions of the panelists, so that too will be the more interactive portion of this session, as long as we have time for a few discussion comments at the end. All right. What you're going to be hearing today, we're going to start with introductions of who these experts are, and then some context about the state of Illinois, which I'm just providing for folks who are maybe less familiar with the specifics or maybe some of the acronyms that'll come up in discussion today. And then we'll go into those panel presentations, discussions, and questions and answers. All right, so statistics in Illinois. In case you're not familiar, it's in the middle of the country. It's up north. on Lake Michigan, if you're in Chicago, sixth most populated state. And actually I was surprised to learn that the population of the state is actually contracting slightly in the last couple of years. They do already have lots of housing units, only 11% of which, however, are all electric. Natural gas being the primary heating source in the state, and true for water heating and cooking as well. So natural gas is definitely utilized really extensively for homes and buildings throughout the state of Illinois. They're not growing super fast in terms of new housing starts, but there is quite a bit of existing pipeline in the ground already. That is regulated through the Public Utility Service. There is an air regulator through the Bureau of Air. I don't know if that's going to come up today, but just for context, has a unique name for those of you that work outside the state. And then the Energy Code Authority in the state is the Illinois Commerce Commission, also known as the ICC. There are quite a few utilities across the state. It is a partially deregulated market, but 9 utilities in total, 5 of which are gas only. And then there is also a trade association that represents the utilities across the country. So just for context, lots of things going on. It's a little hard to read on this map, but you can see that there's quite a few in the more populous areas, several service providers. And then as you get into the more rural center of the state, it goes into some of the larger but more dispersed areas. All right, that's it for your tour. We'll get into some policy. Today, I'm so thrilled to be able to welcome and express gratitude to our fine panelists. Katie McFadden with McFadden Strategies will be giving you some context today. We have JC Kibbe with the Natural Resource Defense Council and Christy Hicks with the Environmental Defense Fund. I'm going to allow them all to introduce themselves as they get into their presentations, but really these are robust experts in building decarbonization and overall climate policy and workings of all that's going on in Illinois. And I can't wait to learn from you all. Thanks so much for being here. So with that, Katie, you want to take it away?
Sure thing. Thanks, Amy. Hi, everyone. My name is Katie McFadden. I run a small consulting firm called McFadden Strategies. I mostly work, or I exclusively work with nonprofits and philanthropies and a few clean energy companies on issues to move forward climate solutions. And my background is actually in organizing and advocacy. So what I'm going to talk to you a little bit about, just to kind of set the stage, Amy kind of told you, some of the regulatory landscape of Illinois. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the organizing and advocacy landscape in Illinois. We're really proud of some big wins we've had for the planet over the last couple of years. We're ready for advocacy around building decarbonization to be our next big win, one of many next big wins in Illinois. And a big way of how we do that is because we have such a robust coalition that is really grounded in principles of equity, but also in organizing and power building. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about our team and what we did around CEJA as kind of an example to set the stage for like how we do business in Illinois. So the Illinois Clean Jobs Coalition is like the big Illinois coalition that works on climate. You can read this slide. I won't read it to you, but is really the main convening space for climate, for environmental, public health, justice, labor organizations that want to work together on climate issues. So you can see it's a very, very big coalition, and we have a lot of structures in place to make sure that we can operate well. So am I advancing the slides? Someone else is advancing the slides, right? Okay, next slide. So I put up this slide to just kind of show we're a big coalition, so we have like lots of structure, and that I think is part of how we operate so well. So we have a business table, we have the climate table, environmental justice caucus, downstate caucus. As you can imagine, in a state like Illinois, we don't want to be just dominated by issues that matter to Chicago. So we want to make sure downstate has a space to really caucus and bring issues to their attention. And then we have an elected steering committee. So this is all to just say we have like a pretty sophisticated operation in Illinois of how we kind of do our advocacy work. And on the next slide, you'll get to see all the different topics that we work on. So you'll see in the middle, we do have Chicago building decarbonization has been a big topic for our coalition, as well as statewide building decarbonization. But we're working on a lot of things. So you can take a look at this slide. I won't read them all, but really anything from electric sector, which is mostly what our landmark climate bill that we passed in 2021 focused on. We're defending that. We're making sure it's working as it is intended, but also really branching into transportation and issues around gas as well. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about CEJA. You can go to the next slide. So this is, as I mentioned, the Climate and Equitable Jobs Act is our landmark 2021 climate bill that we passed in Illinois. And you'll see it was an effort of 3, but really more than that, years of advocacy, where we really got a final package through that we were really, really proud of. So you can go to the next slide. A little bit of the story of how we did it. We actually started before we even introduced a bill with what we called Listen, Lead, Share. So this is where we had community dialogues all across the state for about 9 months to a year, where we said, hey, what should be in a climate bill? We engaged dozens of partners, a number of community members to really think about and grapple with what should we be prioritizing. And this bottom-up policy making we think is pretty unique and we're really proud of, in that we really went to people on the ground and said, what should be in our climate bill? And that's where we started. So that really grounded in how we're able to get the best possible outcomes, best possible policy. And then we did a lot of organizing. So you'll see we had a very robust youth organizing network, which you see on the left side of the slide. We did lots of tactics, as you could imagine, delivering petitions in the bottom right. You can go to the next slide. We have some more fun pictures. We organized specifically against some of the utilities, naming some of the tactics that they were employing during the time. This was also during like COVID times. You'll see in the middle, there are a lot of online Zoom rallies. So we were adaptable to the changing circumstances. You can go to the next slide. We lobbied a lot. You can see we finally did do this was the big lobby day, actually, right before everything shut down because of COVID, I believe is that date. And then we had lobbyists descending on the Capitol. You can go to the next slide. We did a lot of work in the press. So we really had this, strategy of grassroots power in the State House, power in the press. And you can see we were really proud of how we were able to do that using social media, but also making sure that our message was on the conventional outlets as well. You can go to the next slide. And we negotiated. There were a number of different packages out there. Ours was one of the governor had his own bill, utility had their own bill, different utilities had their own bill. And you'll see this was our negotiating team, and we worked to just really get the strongest possible package. And we did that because of the organizing and the power that we had built behind us. You can go to the next slide. And then we won. I love telling this story. It's like as if it was very easy. But when we finally got a package on the floor, it was a bipartisan support. We had folks from all across the state, north, south, east, and west, that were able to vote for this. And it really has been a crowning achievement of the governors, but also of many of our legislative leaders. And so it just really goes to show you that sometimes it can take time, but really putting in the effort around organizing and power building, we can get to that really good bill that we can all agree on, even though it may mean months and months of really nasty kind of sometimes negotiations where you feel like you're not going to get there. So I think we really learned a lot from this experience that's going to also translate to really transforming the gas sector as well. Let's go to the next slide. Oh yeah, this is just more winning slide. So you can see some of the headlines. Yay, we did a really amazing thing that we're really, really proud of, and doing a lot of work to defend now, and really using it as a blueprint for how we win big things in the future. And do I have anything? Oh yeah, what's in the bill? Some people may be interested in that. I'm not going to go too far down the weeds because that's not what our call is about today, but it was very comprehensive, but it did largely ignore the building sector. But you'll see it was mostly focused on the electric sector, a little bit on EVs and transportation. It set end dates for when we have to retire all of our coal and gas generation. It provided a pathway to get to 100% when it comes to clean energy. The thing that we're really proud of is that we really did center this jobs and economic justice piece. We knew from the beginning, from the listening sessions, that it was never going to be enough to just build a bunch of clean energy, but we needed to do it in a way that actually reversed the crimes that the fossil fuel industry had committed basically for the past number of decades. And so we really wanted to center that equity along the way. And that was, we had to hold the line on that for many months. And it got us to a really good outcome at the end. And I think I might have one more on what's in the bill. This is just some of the numbers of the investments that the bill makes. There's a big goal to get 1 million electric vehicles on the road. By 2040, we'll be to that 50% clean energy mark. And then we'll keep going up from there. And 100% carbon-free power by 2045. And I think that might be it for me. So I'm happy to answer. I know there's some questions in the chat. I think I probably went over time, so I'm happy to answer those in the chat while I pass it to my colleague, JC.
All right, thank you so much, Katie. JC, if you want to go ahead and take it away.
Yes, thanks so much. I don't have cool slides like Katie, but that's okay. We're just gonna have a conversation. Hi, everybody. I'm JC Kibbe with the Natural Resources Defense Council. Had a really fun walk down memory lane there as Katie was talking about the Climate and Equitable Jobs Act. What an amazing experience that was. But now I want to talk, pivot a little harder to the building sector specifically, and to talk about some of both the opportunities and challenges that we have here in Illinois on the code side and also on the legislative side of this issue. But to preface that, I want to talk a bit about why this matters and why now, because there's obviously a national conversation that's happening around buildings and gas, but there are more Illinois specific reasons that this has really come to the fore today. So I'll just touch briefly on that. One, to say that the economics have changed really significantly on both the gas side and the electrification side. I won't steal Christy's thunder, but I'll say that prices of gas, both as a commodity and infrastructure, have gone up quite a bit. And on the infrastructure side, Illinois is one of the most expensive in the country. Particularly People's Gas in Chicago has extremely high fixed charges. Part of that is the qualified infrastructure plant charge, which is a fixed charge that they passed about a decade ago. And part of it is just the regular course of doing business. So, and at the same time, electrification technologies have gotten a lot cheaper, and we have the IRA incentives. I also think that the great success that Katie just talked about on the power sector has allowed us to shift our attention to the other largest sources of warming. Like, I think most places, when you tackle climate action, the first thing most states do is the power sector. But then when lawmakers who care about this thing start to look around and say, what's next? The answer is transportation, which we're not here to talk about, and buildings. And this has been a governor who's been very interested in leading on climate change, and we have a legislature that has some real champions on climate. And for folks who have been working in Illinois for a while, I cannot emphasize enough what an incredible change this is from where things stood 10 years ago and what the political environment was like. And so that power building that Katie talked about has really paid off in this space as well. The last thing I'll say about why this matters, particularly in Illinois, as Amy alluded to in the beginning, this is a state where we use a lot of methane gas. And there are impacts from that, not only on the climate side, in that, like, specifically in Chicago, buildings are an especially large source of our climate warming emissions, but also on the health side, that of every state in the nation, folks have heard about childhood asthma being one of the major impacts of gas use, and particularly gas stoves. 1 in 5 childhood asthma cases in Illinois is attributable to gas stove use, which is the highest of anywhere. So I think as the research on health and gas becomes increasingly clear, this is really ground zero for some of that in Illinois because we use so much gas in the state. So that's why it matters. And what are the opportunities? Well, the QIP that I mentioned you know, I don't want to steal your thunder, Katie, but there's some things that are changing in the regulatory environment. But on the code side, there's been some great work that's happened in the last year or so to change the Chicago building code. This has very much been a work in progress, and like any advocacy at the city of Chicago, it's sometimes a start and stop. But there is legislation that has been introduced in the city of Chicago that would move to an all-electric new building code and also create a building performance standard, which over time would require lower emissions from buildings in Chicago, eventually effectively getting us to fully emissions-free buildings. So again, that's been a challenge. As you can imagine, there's been some pushback from the gas industry. Some of the politics around the mayor's race have slowed this down a little bit, but I think because of the organizing and all the momentum that's gone into it, regardless of what happens in the Chicago mayor's race, which is happening today, if you live in Chicago, make sure to go vote. Regardless of what happens with that race, we think that the Chicago building code work is going to continue to be active, and a lot of other major cities are already ahead of us on this. So I think that's live. Also on the code side, Katie mentioned that we didn't do a lot for buildings in CEJA, but we didn't do nothing. One thing that we did do is establish a statewide stretch code. So the way the law was written prior to CEJA, you could not adopt a more climate forward building code in the state of Illinois as a municipality, except for a few around the state that were sort of like legacied in, or if you were the city of Chicago, because it's a home rule. But it was really hard for cities who wanted to take local municipal action to have a climate forward building code to do that. And so the creation of a statewide stretch building code in CEJA really opens the door to municipalities that have done that. Folks are probably aware, a lot of municipalities in the country have been doing this, obviously starting with like Berkeley and San Luis Obispo in California, and sort of like increasingly expanding across the nation. So this is what is going to open the door to those building codes in Illinois. As a regulatory matter, this process is playing out right now in front of the Illinois Capital Development Board. So Katie referenced earlier the Illinois Clean Jobs Coalition. Many members of the Illinois Clean Jobs Coalition are engaged in this process of setting what the Illinois stretch code will be. Many of us recently submitted comments. I'm not sure if she's on the call today, but big shout out to my colleague Valeria Rinken, who was really helpful with bringing those comments together. Submitted to the Capital Development Board comments about what we want to see in that stretch code, and in particular that we want to see an all-electric appendix for both residential and commercial on that stretch code, again, so that municipalities have the option to adopt that. The reason why it's helpful to have this be statewide, I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir for some of you, is that from a developer's perspective, it can be really challenging to have a patchwork of building codes all over the state where it's different. And so the statewide building code allows for a consistent model for municipalities that do want to go above and beyond to adopt that stretch building code. So we think that that'll probably be adopted within the next few months, probably by the end of the year, and then municipalities can begin adopting that right after. So those are the opportunities on the code work. And I want to talk a bit about potential things in the future. Many other states have taken on a pretty ambitious state legislation in terms of addressing fossil fuel use in buildings, moving towards electrification, et cetera. There's no legislation on the books right now currently in Illinois, or even that's been introduced in the legislature. I do think that the really big and nasty gas rate hikes that we're seeing in the state right now are putting the issue of gas and electrification more front of mind for legislators. So you could sort of see more of a policy window opening on that, whether that's this session or next year. I think it's hard to say yet, but just to say some of the places that we're looking for as potential models that you could imagine us borrowing from in Illinois would be in states like Vermont and Massachusetts, where they have introduced, although I believe not yet passed, a clean heat standard at the state level, which is similar to a renewable portfolio standard where your buildings have to get cleaner over time. States like Minnesota, Oregon, and Washington that have adopted an integrated planning process for their gas system doesn't go quite as far as a clean heat standard, but at least asks some harder questions and sort of like requires companies to make more of a case in terms of gas spending about whether that's cost effective or not. And hopefully wrestle with some of the issues around likely stranded assets that we're going to see on the gas system, assuming that we plan to prevent catastrophic climate change. Most of these assets won't be useful in 30 years, but the amortized life of gas assets is often much longer than that. And then finally, you look at somewhere like Colorado, which I think has really brought these things together nicely, where they have both a clean heat standard and a planning process associated with that, so that some of those higher level goals about decarbonizing the building sector can actually make their way into a planning process where they're realizing those. So again, not there yet, but I could imagine that in the future of Illinois. So if there's time, I'll take questions in the chat, but I'm not sure there is. So maybe I will just address those by text and pass it off to my esteemed colleague, Christy Hicks.
Before you take it over, Christy, there was one clarifying question, JC. Could you repeat who in the state is needed to adopt the statewide stretch code?
Yeah, so thanks, No. So that is the stretch code is actually being considered and will be adopted by the Capital Development Board, and then once that is established, municipalities can just like adopt it for their own. So municipalities would not have to create their own code from scratch. They just take that statewide code and like sign on to it essentially. I do not believe that this is the first of its kind in terms of a statewide stretch code, although I don't know off the top of my head who the other examples are.
Yeah, thank you so much, JC. And correct, there are many, many states who adopt stretch codes in that same fashion, Massachusetts and others among them. But thank you for that. Awesome. Gosh, that was a lot of information really fast. I'm guessing there's going to be a robust conversation shortly, but just to continue drinking from the fire hose, Christy Hicks, it's all to you.
Thanks. Well, thank you so much to Amy and the Building Decarbonization Coalition for having me here today. Oh, I got spotlighted. Wow. Okay. This is what I get for being an attorney that doesn't make good slides. So there we go. I've started my intro already. My name is Christy Hicks. I am Senior Director and Lead Counsel for Environmental Defense Fund of Equitable Regulatory Solutions. And I also lead our Beyond Gas work, which includes natural gas utility work, obviously. I have spent my entire legal career practicing before the Illinois Commerce Commission, and now I work in front of other state commissions and lead overarching strategy as well. So I'm very deeply embedded in the world of ICC and State Public Utility Commission work, including all of the intersections of that with building decarbonization. Of course, the natural gas utilities' role in decarbonizing the built environment is maybe one of the most important, given the amount of infrastructure that is in place to support natural gas use in buildings. So I can talk about way more things than we have time for today, but wanted to highlight some really relevant action happening right now in front of the ICC, which is that every major gas utility in our state filed for enormous rate hikes. You heard a little bit about that from JC and Katie earlier, but all in January of this year. And they they came exactly in parallel with the electric utilities filing their CEJA mandated multi-year integrated grid plans and multi-year rate plans. So every major utility in the state has a rate case happening right now. And the reason that the gas utilities all have rate cases that have to be decided by the end of this year is because Illinois, for the last decade plus, has had a legislatively blessed rider. It's called rider QIP, or Qualifying Infrastructure Program plant that has allowed and incentivized gas utilities to accelerate spending on pipeline repair and replacement. It was ostensibly created in response to the PHMSA, or the Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration's call to action after the San Bruno pipe explosion in California in 2010. And at the time, the outsized impact of methane and of natural gas use in buildings really wasn't understood the way that it is today. And also gas prices were relatively lower in comparison to where they are today. So at the time that the legislation that enabled QIP was passed, we were really living in a different world than we are now. And the utilities have been seeking to extend the life of QIP for the last several years because it's actually set to sunset at December 31st of 2023. They've not been successful in that. And so this year, realizing that the writing was on the wall here, QIP was going to expire, they actually had to each file rate cases in order to move all of the expenses that have been going through this line item rider into their base rates. And just the highest level primer for those that maybe are a little bit less familiar with how rates are set, the gas utility bill that you get in the mail has a couple of different portions. There's the commodity of the gas itself, that's the supply side. And then there's the distribution side, which is the cost of the utility in getting the gas to your home. As Amy explained, we're a deregulated state. So the gas supply can be competitively procured, but the distribution is, of course, a regulated monopoly. So the gas utilities get to set the rates for how much it's going to cost them to get gas to your home. And those are, of course, approved by the Illinois Commerce Commission. And within the distribution portion of the rates, there's a few different buckets as well. One of the biggest drivers of these particular rate increases that are at issue here are infrastructure, which is what's included in rate base. These are capital investments that, as JC said, are amortized over decades, truly over generations, especially when it comes to pipeline infrastructure. It's assumed to have a useful life of somewhere between 30 and 70 years, typically, depending on what that particular infrastructure is. And then rates are set based on the annual recovery of those costs. As I said, every major gas utility in the state has filed for a rate case, and in total, this will result in about $1 billion worth of rate increases annually. So the grand total of the amount of investments that will be made is actually significantly higher than that. That's just what the annual cost of the rate increases is going to be for customers. So what all of this means, I'm sorry, and the two other parts of rates are operations and maintenance. These are expenses like labor, other things that aren't a capital investment, basically. And then, of course, the utilities return on equity, which is their approved profit level. And each of the gas utilities in the state is asking for increases to their approved ROEs. At the end of the day, this is extremely relevant to building decarbonization, because if the rates are approved that build in the cost of the long-lived infrastructure investments that the utilities are asking to make here, of course, those investments having a useful life of decades actually does lock buildings into gas use or results in stranded assets for generations to come. The way that rates are set assumes this annual amortization and a certain level of depreciation. So it really puts the state in a catch-22 situation for a transition away from gas use in buildings if there are billions of dollars of very new investments that have just been made into pipes in the ground, into other infrastructure that supports it. QIP also allowed utilities to run through the rider, not just pipeline repair and replacement, but things like moving from medium to high pressure systems, moving meters from inside to outside. There was a pretty long list of what was allowed there. Of course, market forces are a really important impact here on where we actually expect to see demand going for natural gas. You have both the soaring natural gas prices that are happening right now, as well as the environmental and climate laws that in Illinois, of course, you heard all about CJO, which was specific to the electric utilities, but are also very relevant to the gas utilities in thinking about, for example, Illinois' commitment to meeting our proportional share of the Paris Climate Accord targets. Although we don't have a gas utility sector specific target or even a methane specific target, planning for meeting those climate goals means taking a hard look at the infrastructure investments that are approved and that flow through rates now, so that we don't find ourselves 5 to 10 years, even 20 and 30 years down the line here from having billions of dollars of unused investments. So a few particular issues of note in each of these gas cases is the size. Two of them were the first and second largest gas utility rate increase requests in the state historically, full stop. They are combined the largest amount of rate increases that have ever been pending at one time. And of course, they support continued investment in the natural gas system, assuming really a business as usual demand, which we know, as I was talking about with market forces and climate goals, is not likely to be the case. So we think it's really important to start aligning gas planning with climate goals. And if we do not do that now in these rate cases, these investments will be approved, and there is no retroactive rate making. There is no going back and getting any of those costs back out of rates. Once they're in, they are sunk costs. Also, Peoples Gas in particular, which is the utility that serves the city of Chicago, has used its money really poorly for the amount of time that Rider QIP has been in place. There's a lot of different news stories that you can go out and look at. There has been a lot of mismanagement. The program is about 5 times over budget from what Peoples Gas said that it would be at the time when they got the legislation for QIP passed. They said it would cost about $2 billion. They're well north of $10 billion now, and they're nowhere near finished. But at the same time, they're not actually reducing the amount of emissions on the system because of the age of the pipe. And so a 2020 engineering review found that 80% of the utilities pipes need to be replaced in the next 15 years. And from our perspective, we shouldn't just be investing in pipe replacement. We should be looking to cleaner alternatives, particularly because that CEJA having just passed because of these important state climate goals that we have. And now we also have the Inflation Reduction Act incentives, many of which are related to building electrification that should be considered as well. And JC talked a little bit about the high fixed charges in these rate increase requests, which is also a really important part of building decarbonization, because the amount of a fixed charge on your bill doesn't change depending on, if you are conserving energy and using less gas in your building. Peoples Gas, which already has among the highest fixed charges in the country, is looking to increase that to about $45 per month. So before a customer has used a single therm of natural gas, they're going to be paying $45 off the top to the utility. That means that low use customers have less opportunity to reduce their bill. And it means that there is not as strong of an incentive for customers that have some latitude in their usage to do that. And there's a lot of inequities with fixed charges as well, particularly thinking about low and moderate income customers paying the same fixed charge as wealthier customers who live in larger homes and have the highest usage. So I feel like I'm maybe already bumping up against my time. Just a couple of other quick notes. In tandem with this, as I said, the CEJA implementation, multi-year integrated grid plans and multi-year rate plans are going to be happening in tandem. So it is actually a really cool opportunity for us to be looking at electric distribution grid plan investments at the same time as we are considering the gas distribution system investments. There are all of these incentives from the Inflation Reduction Act coming online, many of which are going to start moving in the very near term. Then on the flip side of that, gas utilities across the country, including here in Illinois, are looking to push the boundaries and to expand their reach while they can. A couple of previous proposals over the last couple of years in that have been system expansion proposals, use of renewable natural gas, one of the utilities in their rate case isn't proposing to recover investments of hydrogen blending, but is signaling their interest and talking about the research that they're doing into that. And of course, rate cases aren't the only kinds of Public Utility Commission cases where building decarb issues come up. We have energy efficiency plans for both the electric and the gas utilities. As I said, system expansion requests, which is certificates for public convenience and necessity. So there is a lot of action happening at the ICC over the next 12 months that is going to have a really important impact on the trajectory of how successful we are in building decarbonization in the state, depending on the amount that the utilities are allowed to recover and how they're allowed to spend their money in these rate cases. So I'll leave it there, but happy to answer questions.
Thank you so much, Christy. We definitely will have some time for questions. I really appreciate that thorough overview. Oh my goodness, thank you. One thing before I turn it over to audience questions, I just wanted to have an opportunity to ask each of you to answer the same question. And many of the folks on the call today are not from Illinois. And so I just thought I'd ask you each to think about if there was one thing that you would hope other states are learning from your process, from your efforts, and be able to export it everywhere. What would that be?
I can start because I sort of said it in my remarks, so I'll just be really on message. And that is that I think having a really strong coalition structure that was really grounded in whatever values your team has decided are the core of what you want to be fighting for in your state, and that you have systems to hold yourself accountable. So I mentioned we have I think a lot of process. We've spent a lot of time, and actually I think the bill getting delayed because of COVID, it did mean we kind of spent an extra year getting our norms down and talking to ourselves a lot. But I think it made us stronger when push came to shove with CEJA, and I think it continues to make us stronger because we do have these structures in place to make sure that we're making decisions that are truly grounded in the organizations and the people that we're trying to represent. So yeah, I'll stop there.
Go for it, JC.
I was actually trying to point at Christy so that she could go first, but I don't know if that works. I was trying to do a Brady Bunch thing.
That's funny.
I thought you were raising your hand. Well, thanks, JC. It's so hard to come up with the one thing. One of the things that I think is really important, particularly thinking through the regulatory perspective, given the outsized impact that approved rates and approved investments do have intergenerational impacts on building decarbonization, is the importance of embedding equity in the energy transition from the outset, including participation in these really technocratic and arcane processes that have historically excluded frontline and environmental justice communities, and even that we have some really fantastic consumer advocates in the state, to a large extent, low-income customers, when especially you think of the resources that the gas utilities have, that we as nonprofits and stakeholders are coming up against. The communities that bear the disproportionate burdens of fossil energy use, including natural gas, today and in the future, are least represented in these kinds of decision-making processes. That's also true in legislation. That's why we have the coalition, in siting decisions and energy production decisions, and meaningful representation at public utility commissions and at the ICC means both having a seat at the table and the knowledge and the resources to meaningfully participate. So I guess what I'm getting at here is, please participate at your public utility commission and support voices that have not traditionally been a part of these processes, because they're going to have intergenerational equity impacts. And it's never been more important that we do everything we can to support community voices.
All right, that leaves you, JC.
These two are just as tough of an act to follow as I anticipated they would be. So I will, it builds off, I think, what both Katie and Chrissy said here, but I think we particularly saw this in CEJA, and I think it's incumbent on us at the Illinois Clean Jobs Coalition to keep it going. But the amount of grassroots policymaking, Katie talked about the listen, lead, share process that we did. That was like an ongoing theme throughout the advocacy, was that accountability and process, to where people that were like at the level of volunteers that were involved in the coalition, out knocking on doors, were like in the room when we were talking about what we should do next and had an opportunity to weigh in. And an awareness about the importance, both from a moral and a political perspective, of centering racial and economic justice in this work. I don't mean to say that we're perfect. I don't mean to say that work is done. It never will be done. And I don't mean to say that we all have it figured out, but at least an awareness that that has to go hand in hand with the climate work that we're doing, I think has been such a tremendous asset to us here. Like I said, that will always be a work in progress, but I think when you look in the past and when initiatives like CEJA failed, it was because that wasn't there. And that's just been such a huge asset. Last thing I'll say, being bold and demanding solutions that are actually up for the task of what we need to do. I think Katie alluded to this at the beginning, of like, there were moments where it looked like it all was going to go off the rails because people said like, oh, this is very cute. Like, you have your like messaging proposal where you're going to move to 100% like clean energy, but like what, but then we're going to sit down and figure out what we're really going to do. And you'll go back to the kids table and like, to be like, no, this is actually what we're doing. And we're willing to like grind the gears of this whole machine to a halt, like if this isn't what we're talking about. And I think that we need to be thinking about getting ready for something like that again on the gas side. And I think that that is going to be really hard. And we have seen in other places how powerful and insidious the machinery of the gas industry is and how nasty some of those tactics that we use are. So I think we need to continue to deepen our process and the beating grassroots heart of our coalition, and we need to reach down and find that courage again, because I think we're gonna have to go through something similar in the next few years here.
Yeah, if I can just add one quick thing on what JC just said, because I see there's been a couple follow-up questions in the chat. People are like, okay, but like literally, what did you do? So like very literally what happened is the last day of legislative session is May 31st. And on May 31st, we were ready to go pass a bill. If you saw one of those lobbying pictures of like everyone wearing their blue suits, that was May 31st. We were ready to go pass CEJA. We had what we thought was an agreement. And there was a last minute curveball that was thrown at us that the industry, labor, and the Senate, just to name names, thought that they could, the fossil fuel industry, thought that, you know, we were weak, we're enviros, we're going to roll, we're going to try to get our bill done before May 31st. We'll take whatever like curveball they're going to throw in it. And we did it. We let the clock run out. We said, okay, we walked away. And that was the first time that we as the environmental community ever did that, because for the first time, we had enough votes. So we had built enough power. We had a letter that we had legislators sign, and we knew that we had enough votes that we could block what they were going to do. And so we did. And we walked away and we went home and we didn't pass a bill. And it was very sad, but we did in September. So then it was 4 more months of negotiating. And that was really, really hard. And there were throughout that whole summer, there were similar points like that. I think those were that was a big lesson for us, and that whole summer but that was the kind of thing, yeah, and JC will elaborate, but that we had to be willing to do. And also that is a testament to the power that we built. We couldn't have done that and it be meaningful if we didn't have enough legislators sign onto a letter that said no climate, no equity, no deal.
That's great. Super inspiring. Thank you. We do have several questions. I'm going to pivot a little bit. Some of them are related and some of them are not to this specific discussion. So specifically, and forgive me if I've missed some because the chat has been active and you all the panelists have been really good about answering them in the chat. So thank you. But I see a question here specifically about what's needed to overcome gas utility arguments for more gas infrastructure and investment and higher fixed charges.
A lot. I'll just briefly say and let the experts talk, but I think the lesson from CEJA that we can learn is like, we spent years building the ground, laying the foundation of like, we got to get off coal plants, we got to get off gas plants, it's time for clean energy. And I know from the organizing side, building that consensus from our base, and then it's going to kind of flow from there. I'll pass to Christy.
Yeah, I mean, this maybe sounds weird coming from the lawyer, but changing hearts and minds about natural gas. For one thing, that, you know, natural gas is a marketing term. Natural is very intentional. The American Gas Association has what they call the AGA playbook that has successfully branded natural gas as safe, clean, reliable, and affordable. And I think it's really important that we as a community understand the misinformation that is out there, inoculate against it, and start taking steps to beat back all of those messages. The most important tactic from my perspective being that of cost, that gas is not cheaper. Gas isn't going to be cheaper 10 years from now. It isn't cheaper today. Both from a societal standpoint, as well as, you know, just an actual wallet share, like what you're paying today for your gas commodity and your distribution system costs, and what $1 billion in rate hikes means for rates 10 years down the line, because it compounds every year. I mean, I think, you know, engaging in the regulatory space and in the policy and the legislative spaces is really important, but also just messaging, marketing, advertising. There's a lot of misinformation out there about natural gas, and we need to get on top of it.
And just to expand on that slightly, like, I think even well-intentioned people, like the challenge of when you're trying to change the status quo is that there's like an assumption that the status quo is fine and it works. And when you're trying to say, let's do a new thing, everyone's like, whoa, 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 whoa. What's up with the new thing? Even if their heart is in the right place. Like, and this is true at the grassroots level. This is true of legislators. This is true of media. This is true of regulators, where it's like, people are like, well, wait, like, can heat pumps actually work in the winter? Like, don't we need like gas to stay warm? Like, what is induction? How does that even work? Like, how do I cook my food on that? Is it gonna, like, what if I have a pacemaker? And there's so much understanding that has to happen just on like what this is, why and how it works. Like, we had to go through this with renewable energy. Like, well, doesn't the sun not always shine and the wind not always blow? And then like after years and years of like educating people about what renewable energy is and how it works and why transmission matters and everything else, we got there. So I think there are definitely bad faith actors and bad faith arguments that we need to counter and organize against and all these other things. But we also just need to get people familiar and comfortable with this stuff, because for people who don't live in this world every day, a lot of it is new and unfamiliar.
Great. I think we have time for maybe one more question. We'll see. This one is perhaps a conglomeration. There's several questions in the chat that are around what the coalition needs right now, what it will take to win, how do we ensure meaningful participation from historically excluded community members, and what other industries are needed to come to the table in terms of architects, engineers, hospitality, et cetera. So forgive me for those people who ask those questions. We're trying to like smush them all into one, but we'll see if I can at least answer them in part.
Yeah, right. I'll start. I'll just say I think we need it all. We have a really good base that, you know, we talked about with the Illinois Clean Jobs Coalition, but like, I think we need folks that are able to fight the rate cases. I think we need folks who are able to show that decarbonization really can happen, and what does, to JC's point, what does induction and a gas stove look like in my home, and what is a heat pump? Like, we need folks who are ready to advocate on those solutions. We need organizers who are ready to start talking about this in their communities. We need communicators, to communicate this. So I sort of think we're in a really good place, but we're also like, we have a lot of work to do. And so no matter sort of what piece of the puzzle you occupy, Illinois needs you.
Anyone want to add to her rallying cry? I mean, that was pretty good. Excellent. Well, I see actually you're getting volunteers in the chat. If you
Oh my gosh, this is so excellent. Okay. Oh my gosh.
in particular, a chef. So that might be
Yes.
rather useful.
Oh, we need it.
Volunteers. I just want to take a couple of moments to express our gratitude. Really, this has been so much fantastic information, and the work that is happening in Illinois really is transformational potentially. And thank you all for taking time out of your busy and important lives to share with us that work and get recruits while at it. Who knew? So fantastic. Really appreciate the information, the presentations, and all of your good hard work. Thank you all for attending, and we look forward to diving in. If I didn't mention at the top, we're trying to start a new series where we highlight different states around the country. So we will be announcing that next one once it's settled, but look for more information on that soon. Thank you so much for your time, and enjoy the rest of your day. And don't forget to vote if you're in Chicago. Take care.